As soon as I realized I was dying and there was nothing I could do about it, I relaxed into it, and I promise you that dying is no different than falling asleep. I can still catch glimpses of it right now as I talk. I could see into infinity, but my reflection was not in the way, and it was not just forward and backward. It was any direction I looked. It was infinity, but it was not just going on forever. It was infinite love. Our spirit is infinitely conscious and immortal. And the self, when we die, reintegrates with this eternal love. It's our loving essence that continues, that image of God within. I think perhaps love is another sense, and we're only catching glimpses of it while we're alive. We need to love ourselves, love one another, and love all creation. That's why we're here.
The A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast.
I am here with Chris Larson, and she had an amazing NDE during the pandemic. Hello, Chris. How are you?
Hey, AJ, thank you so much for inviting me. I really value your YouTube channel. It's got a lot of good insight, and you're a person I consider simpatico with my understanding of what goes on.
Thank you. So what can you tell me about your experience?
I had the NDE during COVID. It was a reaction to my first and only vaccine. And I was not expecting that. But what happened was afterward, I realized that so many things that go on in life are connected and are reflections of the beyond. I had my first and only vaccine for the COVID, and hours later, I stopped breathing. I ran outside and tore off the mask thinking that fresh air would help, but it did not. My husband looked at me with horror, you can imagine, and he said my lips were turning blue, and I mouthed, to comfort him, I mouthed the words, "I love you," because when you can't breathe, you cannot speak. So when he saw me say, "I love you," he said, "Does that mean you're dying?" And I nodded yes, and I collapsed. But what's significant about that is as soon as I said yes and affirmed that I was dying to myself, I relaxed. So before that, I was frantically struggling to breathe. But as soon as I realized I was dying and there was nothing I could do about it, I relaxed into it. And I promise you that it was no different. Dying is no different than falling asleep at that point. So then this comes the fun part. So my poor husband's still struggling on the other side, but I experienced this slow, intense moving line. I know other people talk about tunnels. I had a line, but it was deep, intense, like a dawning or a twilight line, moving incredibly slowly. There was all kinds of frantic things going on around it, but the line was tranquil and comforting and loving. And it was infinite. The infinite part reminded me of when I was a little kid. My parents would take me to the Wildwood, New Jersey boardwalk, and there were mirror mazes. And in the center, there was a big mirror in front and back, and you could see into infinity, either direction, except that your own reflection was in the way. Well, with the near-death experience, I could see into infinity, but my reflection was not in the way, and it was not just forward and backward. It was any direction I looked. It was infinity, but it was not just going on forever. It was infinite love. And the loving part of it reminds me of a song I learned when I was a child. "I've got that peace that passeth understanding down in my heart." And it was infinite love and comfort, and I felt like I was incredibly at home. But it was familiar, very familiar, and I'll get back to that. After I collapsed, my husband was dazed and called 911, of course, and paramedics arrived and evaluated me. And at that point, I was not there. So everything I'm telling you right now is just hindsight, what I've been told. My experience with the NDE was in flashes of awareness. rather than a linear sequence. So it's very hard for me to wrap words around what I experienced. But that beautiful, slow moving line, I can feel it even as I describe it, and it gives me goosebumps. Um, because it was so familiar. I had experienced it many times before in my life. And I didn't realize its spiritual significance until this NDE. The colors, the amazing colors beyond our limited five senses here. There were other experiences. I think perhaps love is another sense, and we're only catching glimpses of it while we're alive. And that's why it seems so intangible to us sometimes. The hearing, I had, I heard in harmony. It was delightful. I kept being drawn back, but then I'd go away again, and I'd hear voices, but they were always in harmony. There was another note, a touch, attuned to them that was beautiful. And the tinnitus, I was hearing loud ringing, but it wasn't upsetting to me. It was as if I were inadvertently eavesdropping on a place I wasn't supposed to be hearing yet. So I tried to pay attention to that and comprehend what the sound meant. It's not what was being said. It's not words. It's awareness. It's understanding. But I couldn't catch the understanding of that. And also at the same time, others were struggling, paramedics and my husband and everyone, the hospitals, they were all struggling to bring me back. At the same time, I'm floating back and forth because it's not absolute on and off. It's a permeable membrane. Okay, so on this side, EMS arrived. They revived me. I stopped breathing again, and I was transported to the hospital by ambulance. The first hospital, I was diagnosed with transient global amnesia, and the only thing I remember about that, the only thing I remember from the time I stopped breathing, was a TV talk show host. They had a TV in front of me, and the host was insisting that I tell him the date. And I had to really struggle to remember. And all I could think of was a lot of twos. And I remember telling him a lot of twos. Well, it turns out that was the neurologist. Because of the pandemic, they had doctors coming remotely. But I thought it was a talk show host. Then they took me to another hospital where I was diagnosed with an autoimmune reaction to the messenger RNA in the vaccine. Now, I'm not opposed to vaccines. My paramedic background, I know how important vaccines can be, but I think people need to weigh the odds of the probabilities of the disease versus the probabilities of danger from the vaccines. And we're not given that information. At the second hospital, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune reaction to the messenger RNA in the vaccine. I'm not opposed to vaccines, but you have to weigh the probabilities of danger from either direction you choose. It's a forced choice. But I had a horrific headache. There was a brick. I visualized a brick twirling around in my head with razor sharp points and edges. And it was turning very fast. And then gradually it became more muted and slower until it disappeared into the background. And then I was diagnosed with meningitis. I remember a physician, and I only remember things in splotches. And that's because of the time thing that happens in the beyond, which I'll tell you in a sec. But I remember one doctor saying that the amnesia was a blessing. And that blessing, when he said blessing, it went off like a stop sign for me because he understood the bodily suffering, but he did not comprehend that my spirit was soaring. So the NDE and the out-of-body experiences continued. It wasn't just an on-off switch. Throughout the hospital and throughout the following year, I continued to have glimpses of what I had experienced. There are senses beyond the five senses limited to this side. during life, 3D living, we have 5 senses that we're aware of. But I'll tell you a little bit about the beyond senses. So impossible colors. And I just love colors. So this was a delight. Fabulous fragrance that breathed life into me. There's a poem by Edna St. Vincent Millay, Renaissance, and my favorite line is, "I know not how such things can be. It breathed my soul back into me." And that's what this was like. This, I can still catch glimpses of it right now as I talk. Not as vividly as when I was in the beyond, but it's the best I could describe it would be like a combination of amniotic fluid and fenugreek, and the taste when the surface has worn off a fork and you put it in your mouth, and that metallic taste, but it was a smell, but it was a delightful, enchanting aroma. It was beautiful, and it helped me breathe deeply because I couldn't get enough of it. And this keeps happening every now and then. Sound, I got to tell you about sound. It's so much fun. Everything I heard, my voice, a tap, anything, when people were speaking, everything was in harmony. I heard harmonics with everything that was going on, every sound. And then also the tinnitus, that loud, piercing, distracting sound that aggravates people so often. I saw it as an inadvertent eavesdropping into the beyond, maybe other dimensions, I don't know. But whenever I'd have the tinnitus, which still continues on occasion now, but not so intently, but I'd listen to it, trying to decipher it, and I never could. So there was lots of fun like that. But especially the telepathy part. This is a misunderstanding that I want to try to clarify. It's not that in the beyond that you can hear voices instantly and in words. There are no words. There's no language. It's like an instant understanding that we lack while we're alive. The understanding flows without words. I think of it as like comprehensible coherence. And then this side, when I try to understand language, and this went on, my husband says, for over a year, but I lost all track of time because the other side, the beyond, is timeless. I had trouble reorienting myself to life in terms of time, calendars. Like I know I took out the trash yesterday, or maybe it was last week, or maybe it was this morning, but I still struggle with when things occurred. Language, I had a terrible time with language because everything had to be spoken very slowly for me to comprehend. And then I would suddenly realize I would try. It wasn't frustrating. It was a struggle. It was difficult. And I would concentrate as hard as I could up to the point where I realized I was 4 or 5 sentences behind. And then what would happen was amazing. I would be struggling, and then all of a sudden my brain would like short circuit and go, Phew, and then all was well. And I was back on that line, that calm, reassuring, loving home plate, whatever it was. But that happens, that still happens, but not so often. And I can speak now. I would try to speak and I would stutter. I've never had a stammer before, but for a long time, someone would ask me a question and trying to get the words out would come out as and I could feel it in my brain where my brain was trying to find. It was like if you know 2 languages and you're trying to interpret into another language. It was like that. So I want to connect the dots of what I experienced during my NDE with a lifetime of similar experiences, out-of-body experiences and spiritually significant experiences. These did not just occur during trauma. I was sexually and physically molested as a child, lots of traumas, but it also occurred during momentous events and intense concentration. Just an amazing experience. And it had to do with that solid, slow moving line. Now, as a pre-verbal infant, I thought, and I'm one of those people who remembered in vivid detail all my childhood. That's gone away since the NDE, but I still remember remembering. But pre-verbal, when I was an infant, I had remembered things in shapes, sensations, textures, and smells, rather than words. I hadn't acquired language yet. My first out-of-body experience with the line, I called it a line dream with hindsight, because I understood line. I didn't know the word tunnel, but I understood the word line was one of my first words that I comprehended. Oh, this is a line dream. So my first one was, I had an umbilical hernia as an infant. My mother told the story many times when I was a kid, and there was always something that struck me wrong about her rendition of what happened. I had the surgery. It infected. I was taken back to Philadelphia Children's Hospital, where my physician was C. Everett Koop, who became the Surgeon General. My mother said if she had known that he was going to rise to such notoriety, she would have had him autograph his work. But I had sepsis. I remember distinctly him saying the words, "Lay her down." I did not know what they meant until they did it. And then he took a scalpel to my abdomen. I don't know if I was anesthetized or not. I know there was screaming. It was probably mine. But my mother would say of the story, the nurse and my mother were holding me down, and she would always say that the odor, when he sliced it open and all this putrid stuff came out of me, she said the odor made the nurse faint. But it wasn't the odor. What I recall was a female presence. I remember looking down and seeing the tops of heads and the struggle, but it wasn't the odor. There was this female empathy that was comforting me as an infant. And with hindsight, I'm guessing it was that nurse, and it was the empathy that made her faint, not the odor. So another one, when I was 3 years old, I remember experiencing the line dreams, is what I called them. And something very important about this is that I normalized it. I thought everyone had line dreams. They just didn't have words for it, but I thought that was common until I was much older. It's a sensation. I can feel it in my fingertips. It's like you can feel the energy before your fingers touch. And I can feel it in my tongue, on the back of, when my tongue is on the roof of my mouth, just behind my teeth, barely touching the roof of my mouth. And it's a sensation. I can't bring it on. I can't make it happen, but it happens during momentous events in my life. So when I was 3 years old, I had asthma, very severe asthma, before the effects of secondhand smoking were known. My father was a 2-pack-a-day guy. He was a very loving man. And he came in to my bedroom and had sliced an onion and put it on my chest, because that's what his mother did when he was little. I remember thinking, this is how I will die. I'm going to drown, not in a bathtub or water. I'm going to drown on my own fluids. It was very, as a matter of fact. And I remember distinctly the line and my concerned parents. But mostly I remember my dad promised me an Eskimo pie ice cream if I survived. So I survived. And then in second grade, I felt something in my hair, and I reached up and got stung by a bee and fainted. I remember the teacher telling us never to interrupt her reading group, so I didn't, and I just sat very still until I passed out. But during that one, I had the line dream again, and I superimposed a commercial advertisement for Good and Plenty candies onto my line dream. So the line dreams would change in theme, but they were always that comforting sense of being home and loving, infinite love. It was just beautiful. But Choo Choo Charlie, I remember it was fun. It was always lots of fun. It was like a fascinating ride. In my teens, when I was 13, I had a line dream that I shared. It was the first time I had shared it. Inadvertently, I was seeing the lines, and there were lines in the room of all colors. I was on the solid line, but there were funny lines. One went on my sister's nose and bounced off. I was diagnosed with delirium, so I never shared that again. There was an example in my teens of trauma. I had to give an oral book report. Now that's traumatic for a teenager. So I was standing in front of the class and giving my oral book report, and the next thing I knew, I was outside the third-story window, and I could see my profile and the profile of all my classmates. And I was calm and on the line. I remember my heart had been beating out of my chest when I was trying to give the report, and outside the window, I was calm. But once I calmed down enough and everybody started fidgeting in the class, I thought I better finish my report. So I went back in and I finished the report, and it was verified by the students who said it was a good report except for that really long pause. So that assured me that it actually happened. But now I want to tell you about an incident that involved deep concentration. I was trying to learn an algebraic equation. I forget what it was, but I was concentrating really hard, and I really enjoyed math, but I couldn't figure it out. And then suddenly it dawned on me. And when it did, I was 2 towns away, hovering over the Dairy Queen, and I could see the tops of people's heads and the ugly wires on the roof. And I probably would have forgotten that if it weren't for the fact that for a long time after that, whenever I did that type of math, I would remember that vision over the Dairy Queen. Now I want to progress to my paramedic years, where the definition of death became really fuzzy. But the difference between clinical and biological death and how long you have to revive someone was drilled into our heads. First, it was 4 to 10 minutes where you're starting to develop brain damage. Then they expanded it to the golden hour, and then even longer with hypothermia. And that's when I started to realize that death is not an on-off switch. We're not dead or alive. There's this permeable membrane that we exist in. And that's what I'm trying to talk about by connecting these dots. I had a patient on PCP who punched me in the face. There was a lot of commotion at the scene. The police were holding her down, and as soon as she punched me in the face, I had the line, and I was calm and loving. One thing I remember distinctly about that was that there was a lot of anger in the other people that I recognized telepathically toward the patient. But all I sensed was loving kindness and understanding of her predicament. I cared for my mother. She had dementia during the last years of her life, and I realized then how broad death is in terms of she was existing both here and there, and dementia and other brain dysfunctions are ways of tapping into the beyond while we're alive. I think it happens all our lives. I think sleep is a dress rehearsal for dying. That's no big deal. Yes, there are nightmares, but that's just when we're fighting something. Our body transports our spirits through life. Our brains receive, they do not project our spirit. It's our body and our flaws that are mortal. Our spirit is infinitely conscious and immortal. And the self, when we die, reintegrates with this eternal love. I write about that in this book I published. This was just published this year, and it's already gotten a couple of national and international awards. And it's about dementia and my mom's experience. I've even got videos of my mom during these transitional experiences between life and afterlife. And I really enjoyed writing it. It's a beautiful book, I think, and I'm getting a lot of good positive responses to it. But I talk about near-death experience in the end, the last chapter, and I talk about what to do with the body of a person you love, because it's something nobody writes about. What to expect and what really happens. And then I go into the near-death experiences of both my mother, my brother, and I.
How do you feel about death now? And what would you tell someone who fears death or maybe recently lost a loved one?
I know I'll see my mom again and my brother. In fact, they come to me now. My brother came to me after he died of brain cancer. I was very troubled, and he came to me, and I could feel his arms around me. And he had a good sense of humor, and he said, "Hog heaven is a misunderstanding. It's actually hug heaven." And I do not believe hell may be a place, but it's not a place that anybody goes, because it's our loving essence that transcends. I think that our body and our flaws, and some people have a bunch of them, those are the things that die, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It's our loving essence that continues, that image of God within. Yeah, that continues.
Hey, however, people have distressing NDEs and also hellish
I think it's
NDEs.
because they're bucking it. I think they're fighting it. That's the based on my experience, it has to be, because it's just like when I was fighting dying and I was struggling so hard against it. That was the hard part. And if you've done things wrong that you regret, that's going to haunt you and make you struggle more. But you're also going to work through it, because whatever degree of loving experience you have had during life, that will be promoted.
Yeah, well, all hellish experiences or distressing experiences turn out to be positive because people learn something.
Exactly.
From it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, like Gandhi woke up on the wrong side of the bed and got in trouble once in a while with his wife, and Hitler was a lovely artist and was kind to children if they were the right color. But you know, everybody has different facets of their personality, and the trick to life is to nurture the healthy, functional, kind ones, kind aspects of ourselves.
So tell me about the prizes that your book won.
Oh, it got the international Firebird. They're very particular that you say it right. The International Firebird Book Award honor, and the National Literary Titan Book Award, Golden Book Award.
Wow, great.
Yeah.
Well, you had a very interesting experience, and it's made you realize a lot of things.
And they continue.
So you continued having OBEs through?
Yes, throughout life. Yes.
And in these OBEs, do you meet other beings, or are you basically back in that line?
No, it's that line. I experienced the sensation of the line, and then this intense awareness and understanding and infinite love. Yes.
Do you have any final message or final word?
Yes, love one another. We need to love ourselves, love one another, and love all creation. That's why we're here.
This has been the A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.